In 1910, inside a massive shipyard in Philadelphia, a vessel began to take shape under the calloused hands of hundreds of workers. They gave it a strange name, USS Cyclops. The name came from Greek mythology, inspired by the giant one-eyed creature, symbolizing unstoppable strength. And indeed, when the ship was completed, people believed it would be the Navy's steel giant. USS Cyclops was not a warship, but it held a role even more crucial: supply. Its hull stretched more than 160 meters long, nearly 20 meters wide, weighing tens of thousands of tons, capable of carrying enormous loads of coal, ore, and fuel. With World War I approaching, such a supply ship was considered as valuable as an entire fleet of warships. At the harbor, whenever Cyclops set sail, crowds gathered to watch. It was so enormous that it blotted out the sky behind it, with its towering smokestack spewing thick black smoke like a steel dragon breathing fire. Small fishing boats that rode past its shadow felt as if they were gliding beside a moving wall of iron. The ship was designed with gigantic fuel holds, able to transport thousands of tons of coal, and later manganese ore, an essential metal for producing steel and weapons. In wartime, it became the lifeline of the fleet, delivering sustenance across the seas. But Cyclops was not remembered solely for its size or purpose. From the very start, rumors surrounded it. Some sailors claimed the ship carried a certain gloom, unlike other vessels of its kind. Walking its decks at night, one could hear eerie creaks echoing through the steel, like the groans of a slumbering giant. Perhaps it was only the natural sounds of metal contracting in salt air and sea winds, but to human imagination, it bred unease. Inside, over 300 crew members lived and worked within the ship's endless narrow passages. The thud of boots on steel floors beat in rhythm with the constant roar of engines. The air was thick with the mingling smells of oil, coal, and heated metal. For newcomers, it felt suffocating. For seasoned sailors, it was the scent of the sea and their calling. Commanding the ship was Captain George W. Worley, a peculiar man. He did not fit the usual gallant image of a naval officer, but was instead a hard, eccentric figure. Born in Germany before immigrating to the United States, Worley served in the Navy with a cold demeanor and piercing eyes that unsettled many sailors. Some whispered of his volatile temper, at times silent and aloof, at other times erupting in anger. Yet none dared challenge him, for he was the captain, and above all, he knew the ship as though it were part of his own body. With unmatched strength, a commanding leader, and a large crew, USS Cyclops embarked on long voyages, becoming a colossal supply machine across the oceans. No one could have foreseen that only a few years later, this very ship would enter history, not as a symbol of victory, but as one of the greatest unsolved mysteries. The first voyages of USS Cyclops passed in steady rhythm, though always under tension. The ship regularly departed from the U.S. East Coast, carrying thousands of tons of coal to fleets stationed in the Caribbean, sometimes sailing as far as South America. Each departure shook the harbor with its booming horn, a declaration that the giant was on its way. The crew grew accustomed to life bound to cold steel in the sea. They slept in cramped quarters, woke each morning to the clatter of metalwork and the heat of the engine rooms. In the evenings, some gathered on deck, smoking and watching the sun bleed red across the ocean horizon. Laughter rose occasionally with shared tales, only to be swallowed by the low drone of the engines. The ship always seemed alive, like a massive creature breathing. Captain Worley remained an enigmatic figure. His discipline bordered on obsession. Once, upon catching a sailor asleep during watch, he forced the man to stand in the wind for hours as punishment to remember steel discipline. Some whispered that his sternness was tinged with madness. On certain nights, he was seen pacing the deck alone, muttering in German. His disjointed words, mingling with the waves and darkness, sent chills through the crew. When asked, he brushed it off as a harmless habit. Despite rumors, his skill was undeniable. He knew every bolt, every vibration of the ship. In storms, his swift decisions steered Cyclops through raging seas unscathed. For that, sailors respected him, though with an edge of fear. In March 1918, Cyclops received a special assignment to transport over 10,000 tons of manganese ore from Brazil to the United States. This ore was vital for steel production, essential for the ongoing war in Europe. The Navy stressed the cargo's importance. Cyclops had to reach Baltimore safely and on time. Before leaving Rio de Janeiro, many sailors spent a brief night ashore, drinking, singing, savoring rare comfort. Yet an unshakable unease lingered. The ship was heavily laden, bound across the Caribbean during unpredictable weather. Some even mentioned the infamous Bermuda Triangle, where vessels had vanished without explanation. Nervous laughter dismissed the talk, but anxious eyes betrayed lingering fear. The next day, USS Cyclops departed. The skies were bright, the sea glistening. Yet as the rudder turned, groans reverberated from deep within the ship, long metallic moans like sighs of protest. The crew fell silent, listening, before hastily scattering to their tasks, unwilling to speak of it. On deck, Captain Worley stared into the horizon. Dark circles hollowed his eyes from sleepless nights. Whatever he thought remained hidden behind his cold expression. At last, he turned and gave a firm order. Set sail, and so began the fateful voyage, across a vast ocean with hundreds of men aboard, carrying a heavy cargo and a growing sense of foreboding. For several days, all seemed normal. The sea was calm, routines unbroken. But soon, strange events arose. Some swore they heard hammering from below deck, as if someone were striking the hull with metal tools. Yet no sign appeared when inspected, only shadows and the endless thrum of engines. Others felt watched when passing the cargo holds, as though unseen eyes lurked in the dense darkness. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed the overloaded ship's structure was crying out under strain. Others whispered that Cyclops had a spirit of its own, and it was displeased with the weight of ore forced upon it. Worley silenced such talk, forbidding any mention of superstition. But his command only fueled the unspoken fear gnawing at the crew. Cyclops pressed northward, nearing seas notorious for mysterious vanishings. None aboard could know. It would be their final journey. In the last days of the voyage, the mood grew heavier. The sea no longer lay calm. Skies darkened, thick gray clouds swallowing the horizon. Winds rose, at first in bursts, then in howling gusts that shook the rigging. The mighty ship rocked violently, tossed like a speck on the ocean. Inside, the manganese ore slammed against the hull with thunderous echoes, like subterranean lightning. Some sailors feared the overloaded ship might crack apart. They whispered among themselves, but never aloud before the captain. Worley seemed different. He paced the deck in silence, eyes fixed on the storm. Some said that on the worst night, he stood for hours gripping his binoculars, muttering in German to the roaring winds. One curious young sailor approached, only to be pierced by his dagger-like glare, frozen in place. None dared approach again. On March 3, 1918, Cyclops was last recorded in Barbados, resupplying provisions. Many sailors seized the chance to write home, telling families they would soon be back in America. None imagined those words would be their last. Some promised reunions. Others dreamed of rest after months at sea. Leaving Barbados, Cyclops sailed straight into mystery. No radio signals, no distress calls, no plea for help. For the Navy, it was unthinkable. A ship over 160 meters long, with 309 souls and thousands of tons of cargo, simply vanished. When Cyclops failed to arrive in Baltimore, frantic searches began. The U.S. Navy dispatched warships and planes to scour the entire route. They searched every island, every stretch of sea, hoping for wreckage, a lifeboat, anything. But the ocean gave nothing back. No wood, no cargo, no raft. Cyclops had ceased to exist. News spread rapidly. American newspapers called it the greatest mystery in naval history. Families grieved in anguish. Mothers and wives haunted the ports, clinging to fading hope. But days turned to weeks, and hope withered. Theories abounded. Some believed the ship broke down, capsized under its load, and sank. Others suspected a German U-boat attack as World War I raged on. But why no distress signal? Why no trace? Over time, Cyclops became legend. Many tied it to the Bermuda Triangle, that infamous region of vanishing ships and planes. Some claimed it was swallowed by a supernatural whirlpool. Others, that it was dragged into a hidden realm beneath the sea. A few even whispered it had slipped into another dimension, never to return. For more than a century, the truth has remained elusive. Modern technology, radar, satellites, deep-sea robots, has scoured the ocean floor, but yielded nothing. The Caribbean depths stand silent, a vast grave hiding all secrets. Over 300 lives, a colossal ship, and a chapter of history, erased in an instant. USS Cyclops became a symbol of mystery, of questions without answers. Even now, sailors speak of faint metallic echoes in Bermuda's waters, like ghostly reverberations of a ship that vanished more than 100 years ago. The Caribbean Sea in early March of 1918 was drenched in scorching sunlight, yet it carried an undercurrent of unpredictable unrest. From Barbados, the USS Cyclops prepared to continue its final voyage, heading north toward the familiar port of Baltimore. The massive ship, more than 160 meters long, was heavily laden with manganese ore, listing slightly as waves struck against its hull. On deck, 309 sailors bustled with activity, checking anchors, reinforcing cargo holds, scrubbing the salt-dampened planks. Among them, many were exhausted after months at sea. They longed to set foot on land again, to embrace their wives and children, to breathe in the air of home. Conversations about short leave, about nights of revelry in Baltimore taverns, echoed across the deck, creating an atmosphere of both excitement and impatience. Everyone believed that within just a few days, these hopes would be reality. And yet, even in those seemingly peaceful hours, a strange feeling weighed upon the ship. Some sailors admitted they had been unable to sleep for several nights. They were plagued by nightmares, visions of the ship being dragged down into the depths by an invisible hand, or swallowed by an inescapable vortex. These dreams left them drenched in cold sweat upon waking, and few dared to speak of them, fearing they might spread panic. Captain George Worley, with his gaunt face and unreadable gaze, maintained his stern demeanor. He rarely smiled, insisting that the crew keep discipline, but whispers followed him. Some claimed Worley behaved oddly, at times seeming lost in a daze. On certain days, he would mutter to himself for hours, eyes fixed on the endless horizon. Seasoned sailors began to feel uneasy. The day they left Barbados, the sky was clear, the sea only gently rippling. But few knew they were sailing into one of the most infamous stretches of ocean, the Bermuda Triangle. Too many tales had been told of this place: ships vanishing, pilots never returning, sudden storms rising out of nowhere. Some younger sailors scoffed, calling it nonsense, yet the older ones silently crossed themselves and prayed for safety. As night fell, the sea seemed to change. The once bright sky grew heavy with clouds. Stars dimmed, then vanished behind a dense fog. The Cyclops sailed into a curtain of white mist so thick the bow could not be seen from the stern. Signal lamps flickered, lighting patches of haze like wandering phantoms. The air grew unnaturally cold, though the Caribbean should have been stifling at this time of year. The sailors whispered among themselves, convinced the ship was being watched. They saw nothing but fog, yet many swore they heard strange noises, metallic clanging, or voices murmuring from the deep. A few even claimed to glimpse shadowy figures moving within the mist, appearing for a split second before dissolving again. Captain Worley remained outwardly calm, ordering his men to hold their posts and press on. He insisted it was nothing more than unusual weather, but in his eyes flickered a trace of fear. He knew too well that they were crossing waters most captains avoided at all costs. As the night dragged on, the waves rose. At first, small swells, then towering walls of water crashing against the hull. The Cyclops shuddered violently, metal groaning as though the ship might split apart. Below deck, tons of manganese slammed against the bulkheads with thunderous weight. A few sailors were thrown to the floor, blood running down their brows, but they staggered back up, struggling to keep balance. Outside, the ocean roared like a beast awakened. And amidst the chaos, a haunting sense settled over the crew, that they had entered a journey of fate, one from which none would escape. The storm grew worse. Waves as tall as three-story buildings crashed down, flooding the decks with brine. The howling wind wailed like 1,000 funeral horns, drowning out the men's shouts. The signal lights atop the mast flickered, nearly torn away by the gale. John Munro, a seasoned sailor, clung to a railing, his eyes raw from salt and wind. He had weathered many storms, but never anything so unnatural. "This storm! It's not normal!" he shouted. But no one could reply. Every man was locked in battle with the fury around them. In the control room, Captain Worley stared at the compass, face pale. The needle spun wildly, not pointing anywhere, but circling as if pulled by an unseen force. The navigator stammered, "Sir, we've lost direction. The charts are useless." The captain gripped the table, lips pressed tight, though terror showed in his eyes. He ordered the engines slowed, hoping to ride out the storm. But in his heart, he knew it was futile. They were trapped in waters where even nature's laws no longer applied. Then, a young sailor cried out, pointing to the sea. Pale blue lights shimmered on the waves. They were not lightning, but ghostly orbs rising from the depths and circling the ship. Some believed it to be St. Elmo's fire, a known phenomenon of storms. But this was different. The lights weren't clinging to masts or rigging. They danced across the open sea, encircling the Cyclops like predators closing in. Panic spread. Men crossed themselves feverishly. Others collapsed in prayer. Some swore they heard whispers carried on the wind. Hundreds of voices speaking in an unknown tongue, chanting a melody so bleak it chilled their blood. Below deck, conditions worsened. Tons of ore shifted with each swell, pounding the hull with deafening booms like drums of doom. Bulkheads bent, bolts snapped, seawater seeped through cracks, slicking the floors. Sailors rushed to bail, but the flooding outpaced their efforts. Their shouts were swallowed by the storm's roar. The night felt endless. At dawn, the fog still veiled the horizon. The storm was gone, but so was the world. No land, no sky, only a blank white shroud stretching in every direction. Survivors slumped on the deck, exhausted, hollow-eyed. Yet the silence was no comfort. It was the silence of a grave. Captain Worley emerged, his gaze heavy. The radio antenna had been struck down in the night. No distress signal had gone out. They were ghosts adrift, unseen, unheard. By noon, dread peaked. A lookout atop the mast screamed. To the north, a colossal wall of water was forming, taller than anything they had ever witnessed. A vertical wall of ocean stretching to the horizon. The Cyclops was too slow, too heavy, to escape. "Hold on!" the captain bellowed, but many only wept, some collapsing to their knees in prayer. The wave crashed down. Seawater engulfed the ship, sweeping men overboard in an instant. Screams mingled with the shriek of tearing steel. For a fleeting moment, some saw a nightmare within the wave, massive dark shapes moving inside it, creatures of the deep with eyes glowing red through the torrent. And then, all was gone. The Cyclops groaned, twisted, and vanished beneath the sea. When the waters calmed, only foam remained. No wreckage, no bodies, no trace that such a vessel had ever passed. When the colossal wave devoured the Cyclops, an eerie stillness spread across the ocean. No more screams, no more wind, only a vast, deathly calm. If anyone had sailed by the next morning, they would have believed no ship had ever been there at all. In the memory of those who studied Bermuda, the disappearance of the Cyclops became an unanswered riddle. The U.S. Navy launched an extensive search, combing the route from Barbados to Baltimore. Nothing was found. No signal, no wreckage, no drifting lifeboat. That a 160-meter-long ship, laden with ore and carrying over 300 souls, could vanish without a trace was unacceptable to military minds. Reports offered theories. Some claimed the Cyclops suffered mechanical failure, cargo shifting, capsizing her into the depths. Yet if so, debris should have surfaced: wood, oil drums, life vests. None ever did. Others suggested a German submarine attack, for this was the height of World War I. But Germany never claimed it, and no evidence of submarines in the area existed. Gradually, whispers turned toward another possibility: that the Cyclops had entered a dead zone, a place where natural laws falter. Sailors spoke of compasses spinning wildly, radios dying, storms materializing from nothing. Some described Bermuda as a vast trap, swallowing all who strayed inside. Among common folk, chilling tales spread. They said that before the ship vanished, sailors kept journals describing strange blue lights encircling the vessel and voices whispering in the storm. Those journals were never found, but the stories persisted like shadows. Some researchers even claimed the region marked an energy triangle, where Earth's magnetic forces overlapped, disrupting instruments and warping perception. But if only natural forces, could they truly erase a giant vessel without leaving debris? In later years, Bermuda claimed more victims: planes, yachts, fishing boats. But the Cyclops remained the greatest loss in U.S. naval history. A case without answers, without culprits, only a terrifying blank on the map. For coastal people, the Cyclops became legend. They whispered that on foggy nights, the clang of metal could be heard beneath the waves, or the cries of hundreds of sailors rising from the depths. Some swore they saw a massive phantom ship drifting in the mist, only to watch it vanish like smoke when approached. Today, when Bermuda is mentioned, the Cyclops is remembered. It was not just a tragedy, but a reminder of humanity's helplessness before the mysteries of the sea. Even in an age of science and steel, there remain shadows we cannot explain. And within that shadow, the name Cyclops endures, an emblem of fear, of human fragility, and of a question with no answer. Is the ocean merely waves and currents, or does it conceal gateways to another world? In 1918, the world was engulfed in the bloodstorm of World War I. The Atlantic Ocean was a vital transport route, where American and Allied ships carried coal, oil, and weapons across the sea to supply the European battlefields. But it was also the most dangerous sea, where German U-boats lurked silently like giant sea wolves. USS Cyclops, with its massive body over 160 meters long and holds full of manganese ore, became a prime target. In the eyes of many historians, the ship was like the perfect prey: heavy, slow, and without strong weapon systems. Moreover, it carried 309 sailors, an enormous number for any U.S. vessel of that time. Rumors spread that Cyclops had been ambushed by a U-boat on its journey from Barbados to Baltimore. At that time, the Caribbean and South Atlantic were far from safe. Germany had launched far-reaching attacks, even sending submarines as close as the American coast. With their ability to hide beneath the waves, all a U-boat needed was to wait along the shipping lanes, fire a torpedo, and send the Cyclops to the ocean floor. This theory gained weight from a murky detail. Captain Worley of the Cyclops was rumored to have sympathies for Germany. Some discontented sailors claimed he often spoke German, even showing hostility toward German-American crew members aboard. If this were true, then the disappearance of Cyclops might have been linked to betrayal, or an accident once the enemy had full knowledge of the ship's route. Yet no German submarine ever claimed responsibility. Normally, if a U-boat sank a large warship, the German Navy would record it as a victory. But with Cyclops, the files were completely empty. Was this a secret deliberately hidden, or just a strange coincidence? In later years, American historians combed through German naval logs. Some reports did indicate submarines operating near the Caribbean, but none recorded the sinking of a giant vessel like the Cyclops. This made the sunk by a U-boat theory seem half real, half myth, both plausible and riddled with holes. And yet, in wartime, anything was possible. People began to weave a grim picture. Cyclops ambushed on a dark night, torpedoes tearing into its hull, flames rising in the middle of the ocean, and within minutes, the massive ship sinking, taking 309 souls with it. A swift, brutal death, swallowed completely by the night. The U-boat theory was fueled not only by the war, but also by the rumors surrounding that final voyage. Some witnesses in Barbados claimed that before departure, Cyclops had taken on extra cargo of unknown origin. Some said it was manganese ore for the steel industry, but others whispered that the holds carried secret military supplies. If true, the ship would have been an even more tempting target for Germany. Across the ocean, certain intelligence documents suggested that Germany had a spy network within the United States itself. These agents often provided information about shipping routes. If Cyclops was truly marked as a target, its erasure would not have been surprising. Still, the biggest question remained. Why was there no wreckage? If a giant ship like Cyclops had been struck by torpedoes, surely there would have been floating debris, wooden crates, life vests, or oil slicks. Yet search teams combed thousands of square kilometers of sea, finding nothing but waves. Could it be that the sinking happened in extremely deep waters, burying all evidence? Or was there truly an invisible hand covering up the truth? Another odd detail emerged. After the war, a few captured U-boat sailors mentioned having seen a giant American ship vanish suddenly. But their accounts were vague, without dates or coordinates, adding only to the mystery. Some believed the German sailors had witnessed Cyclops fall victim to a bizarre natural phenomenon, a whirlpool or magnetic storm, disappearing before their very eyes. To explain, some modern researchers suggest that Cyclops may indeed have encountered a U-boat, but rather than being directly sunk, some other mishap occurred. A torpedo misfire creating an underwater explosion that destabilized the ship. Or Cyclops, trying to evade, accidentally capsizing itself. In such a case, the U-boat would have had no victory to record, since they hadn't technically destroyed the ship. Others proposed a political angle. Both the United States and Germany remained silent for strategic reasons. If the U.S. admitted that one of its largest ships had been destroyed without resistance, troop morale might collapse. Conversely, if Germany boasted of such a victory, they risked exposing submarine positions. Thus, both sides remained quiet, letting the truth sink forever into the ocean's depths. More than a century has passed, yet the U-boat theory still chills the imagination. It offers the most reasonable explanation for Cyclops' disappearance, but at the same time opens up gaps that cannot be filled. Even today, marine archaeologists have not found the wreck. If Cyclops had been struck by torpedoes, its massive steel hull should lie somewhere on the Atlantic seabed. But dozens of sonar surveys and deep-diving robots have all returned empty-handed. The ocean seems to have swallowed the ship into an unreachable void. Some writers and paranormal researchers take a different view. They argue that the silence of both America and Germany, combined with the lack of wreckage, proves that Cyclops was not a victim of war, but of some invisible force. Blaming German submarines, they say, was merely the Navy's way to rationalize the loss, rather than admit there were phenomena beyond human control. In the imagination of many, the final night of Cyclops plays out like a nightmare. A U-boat rising from the darkness, torpedoes racing through the water, a burst of light, and then everything sinking into silence. At sea, no one heard the cries for help. 309 souls fell into the deep, vanishing forever. But even that image remains only a hypothesis. The truth lies beyond reach. No survivors, no sailor's logbook, no wreck. Only a vast emptiness, as though the ocean itself erased all evidence. Today, the story of Cyclops is still told, not only as a mysterious disappearance, but also as a symbol of World War I, where thousands of lives vanished under the weight of political conflict and power struggles. It has also become inseparable from the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, adding a terrifying piece to its puzzle. Whatever the truth, the U-boat theory reminds humanity of this. War kills not only on battlefields, but casts its shadows across the seas, where life and death can be decided by a single torpedo in the night. And within that shadow, the name Cyclops remains forever bound to one of the greatest unsolved tragedies in U.S. naval history. On its journey from Barbados back to Baltimore, in March 1918, the USS Cyclops entered a sea long known as the most unpredictable in the world, the crossroads between the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean. Here, the massive Gulf Stream currents collided violently with cold winds from the north. Just a slight change in air pressure could create sudden, ferocious storms, powerful enough to swallow even the largest ships. With a body over 160 meters long, heavy and laden with cargo, Cyclops was anything but agile. Sailors once recalled that the ship trembled whenever it met large waves, as if its massive steel hull could feel fear before the strength of the ocean. On dark nights, a sudden gale could send waves tens of meters high crashing over the deck, shattering windows, damaging electrical systems, and gradually causing the vessel to lose control. That may have been the fate of Cyclops. As it entered the waters between Barbados and the U.S. East Coast, a violent storm may have formed. With no satellites, no radar, the sailors of 1918 had only the sky and their instincts to rely on. If the winds shifted, if black clouds swelled across the horizon, they knew danger was near. But this time, the warning may have come too late. It is believed Cyclops may have been caught inside the eye of the storm, where extremely powerful winds created a sea like a giant pit. Once the massive ship was trapped, it could have been tossed, tilted, and suddenly broken apart as the heavy cargo shifted to one side. With no time to send a distress call, all 309 people and the ship itself may have sunk into the ocean within just a few short minutes. That image, in many people's imagination, is like a sudden tragedy. A sky pitch black, thunder tearing the night apart, wind screaming like demons, and in the midst of that fury, the great ship struggling in vain, only to vanish without a trace. Later, scientists offered different explanations. One was the phenomenon of rogue waves. These are massive walls of water rising over 30 meters, appearing suddenly in the open ocean, usually formed by the convergence of wind and currents. In 1918, the concept did not exist, but today, thanks to satellites and research, we know rogue waves are real and strong enough to sink even modern oil tankers. If Cyclops encountered such a wave, tragedy was inevitable. The ship's massive hull would have been lifted high, then slammed down like a toy. No matter how strong, steel plating could not withstand that pressure. Just one crack would let seawater rush into the cargo hold, already packed with manganese ore, adding immense weight and dragging the ship down like a stone. Another theory is an undersea earthquake. The Caribbean is a region where tectonic plates collide, prone to quakes and even tsunamis. If Cyclops happened to pass at the wrong time, a sudden tsunami could have swallowed the ship, leaving no trace behind. For once the waves subsided, only a deceptively calm sea remained. This might explain why rescue teams found no wreckage. Everything had been dragged below with the waters. Some meteorologists also pointed to the Bermuda Triangle. This region is infamous for magnetic and meteorological anomalies, where compasses spin wildly and instruments often fail. If during the storm, Cyclops' navigation systems failed, the ship may have gone off course, drifting into perilous waters before vanishing forever. Whatever the theory, the common thread is the cruelty of nature. The ocean needs no war, no conspiracy. It requires only a moment of fury to consume a massive ship and hundreds of lives. And what is most terrifying is the silence that follows. A sea surface calm, as if no tragedy had ever occurred. Many believe that if Cyclops was truly a victim of a storm or rogue wave, the lack of wreckage is completely plausible. When a massive vessel plunges straight into depths thousands of meters below, the ocean currents quickly scatter all floating debris. Within days, the sea would erase every trace, as if the ship had never existed. It is precisely this silence that turned the tragedy into legend. If wreckage had been found, if sailors' bodies had washed ashore, Cyclops might have been remembered as just another maritime accident. Tragic, but ordinary. But the fact that the entire ship vanished without a trace made it a symbol of the ocean's unfathomable mystery. The families who lost loved ones never received a satisfying answer. They were left only with endless questions. Did their husbands, their sons, die in the storm? Or were they still drifting somewhere, waiting for rescue? But year after year, no one ever returned. No message was ever found. Today, the natural disaster hypothesis is still considered the most plausible by many researchers. It requires no conspiracy, no supernatural forces. One only has to remember that the ocean is among the most destructive powers of nature to understand that Cyclops could indeed have been swallowed in a single moment. Yet, that rationality does not erase the haunting. For in human imagination, the deaths of 309 sailors are not just an accident, but a surreal tragedy. People envision hands reaching out amid the waves, screams lost in the storm, and then everything sinking into a cold abyss. And on the surface, only the howling wind remains, like the ocean's farewell. Perhaps the truth will remain buried forever. But each time Bermuda is mentioned, each time the endless sea is gazed upon, Cyclops is remembered. That ship was not only the victim of a storm, but also proof of humanity's fragility before nature. A reminder that no matter our weapons, our steel, our technology, we remain but grains of sand before the boundless power of the ocean.